The Varric started screaming before the human cadet even entered the arena. And that was the first time in my career I wondered if our most feared predator knew something the rest of us did not. I was standing above training pit 7 with my claws folded behind my back, watching 8 tons of muscle, armor-plated hide, and military conditioning slam itself away from the entry gate like the door itself had become dangerous. The observation deck went silent. Not respectful silent. Not ceremonial silent. The kind of silent that happens when every confident person in the room realizes the universe has just done something off-script. My name is Commander Sirac Vira. I had run Predator response evaluations at the Celestine War Academy for 14 years. I had seen noble-born cadets faint before the gate opened. I had seen decorated exchange officers forget their own names when the Varric lowered its head and growled. I had seen entire squads step into that pit believing courage was enough, only to learn that courage and intelligence were not always the same thing. But I had never seen the Varric afraid. Not once. The creature had been bred on Karath Prime, a moon where the trees grew iron bark and storms could peel paint from a landing craft. Its jaws could bend titanium training poles. Its claws left marks in reinforced arena flooring that our maintenance crew measured in inches. Its hearing could track a heartbeat through a concrete wall. Its nose could identify fear chemistry from 50 yards away. Every cadet in the academy knew the rule. If the Varric looked at you, you stood still. If it stepped toward you, you prayed your instructor ended the test before your pride did something stupid. That morning was supposed to be simple. Final evaluation. Controlled environment. No weapons. No shields. 30 seconds in the circle, and the cadet passed. The Varric was restrained by 3 neural command locks and a pressure collar approved by 6 safety boards. Nothing about the test was random. Nothing about the test was emotional. The Predator obeyed. The cadets trembled. The system worked. Then the human arrived on the schedule. Caleb Mercer. Male. Earthborn. 5 feet 11 inches. 180 pounds. Pale skin. Brown hair. Gray eyes. No natural armor. No venom. No external threat display. His file had been almost insulting in how unimpressive it looked. The medical scan listed normal bone density for his species, normal muscle distribution, normal oxygen dependency, normal everything. The Academy risk algorithm had labeled him low priority, physically limited, psychologically stable, suitable for standard testing. I remember smirking at that last line. Humans always looked stable until gravity, weather, or common sense got involved. Below me, the Varric stopped screaming. Somehow that was worse. Its massive head turned toward the sealed cadet entrance. Its breathing slowed. Its ears flattened. Its claws, which had been tearing bright grooves into the floor a moment earlier, tucked inward. That single motion made the senior handlers step back. Predators do not make themselves smaller unless they are hiding from something bigger. Around the pit, 200 alien cadets leaned forward, waiting for the little earth mammal to be embarrassed in public. Some clicked their mandibles. Some whispered bets. One of the aristocratic Threxian boys laughed and said the human would not last 10 seconds. I almost agreed with him. Then the inner door opened, and Caleb Mercer walked in like he was late to a normal class, carrying no fear I could smell, no swagger I could punish, and no idea that the most dangerous animal in the academy had just decided not to breathe too loudly in his presence. I should have stopped the evaluation the moment Caleb crossed the white circle, but 14 years of command experience can make a person dangerously loyal to procedure. The system said the arena was safe. The monitors said the neural locks were stable. The handler drones hovered at their assigned positions with green status lights blinking in perfect rhythm. Above the pit, the safety glass had been tested against impacts from armored training vehicles. Below it, the floor sensors could read pressure shifts lighter than a falling coin. Everything around me insisted that nothing was wrong, and I believed it because believing the system was my job. At Celestine War Academy, confidence was not a personality trait. It was a requirement. Parents sent their heirs to us from 12 sectors because we produced officers who did not panic when the air got thin, the lights failed, or the enemy started smiling. We taught discipline. We taught tactical restraint. We taught cadets to stand still while every instinct in their body begged them to run. That was the purpose of the Varric test. Not cruelty. Not entertainment. Measurement. A young officer who could not control fear in a controlled arena had no business commanding troops in an uncontrolled battlefield. I had said that speech so many times I could recite it while half asleep. I had watched cadets from heavy-gravity clans enter that circle shaking. I had watched insectoid champions lock every joint in their bodies just to keep from stepping backward. I had watched children of warlords, pirates, admirals, and governors learn that family names did not impress biology. The Varric was honest that way. It did not care about wealth. It did not care about medals. It cared about breath, posture, pulse, scent, and the tiny lies bodies tell before mouths catch up. That was why I trusted it. A machine could be fooled by paperwork. A professor could be fooled by manners. A committee could be fooled by a calm face and clean uniform. The Varric could not be fooled. Or at least, that was what I believed before Caleb Mercer stood 10 feet from the starting line and looked around the arena like he was checking the exits in a grocery store. Not scared, not excited, not even impressed. His gaze passed over the Predator, the handler drones, the command tower, the emergency barriers, and then landed on me. For one uncomfortable second, I felt less like an instructor and more like a person being evaluated by a quiet student who had not yet decided whether my lesson was worth his time. I touched the command panel and brought up his live biometrics. Heart rate steady, breathing steady, skin temperature normal, muscle tension low. The system highlighted the results in soft blue, the color for calm. Behind him, the cadets began to mutter. Someone laughed under their breath. Someone else asked if the human understood where he was standing. Caleb heard them. I knew he heard them because his eyes moved slightly toward the sound. He did not answer. He did not defend himself. He just rolled his shoulders once, loose and easy, as if the academy had confused a survival test with morning stretching. That annoyed me more than it should have. Cadets were supposed to respect danger. They were supposed to feel the weight of the arena. So I opened the instructor channel and prepared to begin, still trusting every light, every lock, every rule, and every tradition that had never failed me before the human arrived. The first thing the class noticed about Caleb Mercer was how little there was to notice. That sounds unkind, but in a war academy full of tusks, crests, armored shoulders, thermal vents, plated skulls, and decorative scars earned in ceremonial duels, a human looked unfinished. He wore the same gray cadet uniform as everyone else, but on him it looked almost plain. No family banners stitched into the sleeves. No honor rings around the throat. No polished academy blades at the hip because the test allowed none. Just a tall young man from Earth with pale skin, short brown hair, and the relaxed posture of someone waiting for a bus in bad weather. The Threxian cadets hated that most. They had spent their lives turning every room into a contest of dominance, and Caleb refused to enter without even trying. He did not lower his eyes. He did not raise his chin. He did not perform respect, fear, or defiance. He simply existed in the circle, calm enough to make arrogance feel foolish. I heard the first insult through the arena microphones. "That is the Death Worlder," one cadet whispered. Another answered, "I have seen kitchen staff with more threat display." A third made a soft clicking sound that his species used for laughter. The sound spread through the observation rows like sparks across dry grass. Within seconds, half the class was smiling. They saw what the file had told them to see. Soft skin, small teeth, rounded nails, no tail for balance, no secondary arms, no visible defensive adaptation at all. To them, Caleb Mercer looked less like a battlefield candidate and more like an administrative error with shoes. I should have corrected them. A good instructor does not allow contempt to replace analysis. But I let it continue because part of me agreed with them. Earth had a reputation, yes. The planet was famous in survival theory courses, mostly because it had more categories of weather than some systems had species. Hurricanes, droughts, blizzards, earthquakes, predators, parasites, unstable coastlines, forests that burned, mountains that froze, deserts that cooked, oceans that swallowed ships. It was a fascinating place to study from a safe distance. But standing there in my arena, Caleb did not look like a product of that chaos. He looked ordinary. That was the problem with humans. They hid the math. A karate warrior showed strength in the shoulders. A Varn showed alertness in the spines. A Threxian showed status in the crest. Humans carried their danger under the skin, behind quiet eyes and casual breathing, where honest species had no easy way to read it. The Varric could read it, though. While the class laughed, the predator lowered its head another inch. Its black eyes stayed fixed on Caleb. Not on his hands. Not on his throat. Not on the obvious places prey usually betrayed itself. It watched his feet. That detail bothered me. Predators watch the part of a creature that moves first. Caleb had not moved at all. Then he glanced toward the Varrock. Not sharply, not fearfully, just a brief look of recognition, and the creature took one slow step back. The laughter thinned. Caleb turned his attention to me again and asked in a calm American accent, "Commander, is there something wrong with him?" In that moment, every cadet in the room understood that the human was not worried about himself. He was worried about the predator. For 3 full seconds, nobody spoke, and I hated that the silence belonged to the human. Not to me, not to the academy, not to the predator we had built an entire evaluation around. To Caleb Mercer, standing in the white circle with his hands loose at his sides, asking if something was wrong with the creature that every other cadet had treated like a living final exam. The question should have sounded naive. It should have made the class laugh harder. Instead, it changed the temperature of the room. The Varrock gave a low rumble from the far side of the pit. Not a challenge, not a warning, something smaller and stranger, almost like complaint. One of the senior handlers looked up at me from his station, all 4 eyes wide. I ignored him. Commanders become very good at ignoring bad signs when too many people are watching. Before I could answer Caleb, Cadet Lord Maven Threx stood in the second row of the observation tier and made the situation worse. Maven was exactly the kind of student old families produced when no one told them no for the first 20 years of their life. Tall, polished, silver-crested, wrapped in confidence he had inherited rather than earned. His father commanded a border fleet. His mother owned 3 defense contractors. His uniform had never been wrinkled. His pride had never been tested by anything that could talk back without consequences. "Commander," Maven called, loud enough for every microphone to catch. With respect, perhaps the animal is confused because the target does not register as a combatant. A few cadets laughed. Not many. Enough to encourage him. He stepped closer to the glass, enjoying the attention. Maybe we should increase the difficulty. For science. There it was. The real reason they had been waiting all morning. Not education. Not readiness. Spectacle. They did not want Caleb evaluated. They wanted him reduced to a story they could repeat at dinner. The soft earth boy. The pale little mammal. The cadet who froze when the academy beast opened its mouth. I looked down at Caleb, expecting anger, embarrassment, anything. He gave Maven one brief glance, then looked back at the Varrock. That was all. No speech. No insult. No performance. Somehow, that made Maven look smaller than if Caleb had answered. "The standard test is sufficient," I said. My voice carried across the arena speakers, clipped and formal. Maven bowed his head, but only slightly. "Of course, Commander. I only thought the Academy might want accurate data. Human reputation has been inflated lately. Death world. Stories. Survival myths. Primitive bravery mistaken for real capability. It would be unfortunate if our final evaluations became theater." That was clever. I will give him that. He had accused me of weakness while pretending to defend academic standards. Around him, the other aristocratic cadets straightened. They wanted the same thing, but Maven had given it respectable language. Accurate data. Real capability. Proper testing. I felt the trap close around my own pride. If I refused, I looked protective of the human. If I agreed, I risked letting a spoiled cadet influence a military evaluation. Caleb solved the problem in the most infuriating human way possible. He raised one hand, not high, just enough to be recognized in class. "Commander Vira," he said, calm as a person asking about homework. "If they need the test to be harder, that is fine." The room went still again. Maven smiled. I did not. The Varrock pressed itself lower to the floor, and for the first time that morning, I wondered whether the only creature in the arena making intelligent decisions was the one refusing to stand. I authorized one adjustment, and only one. The restraint field would drop from training distance to close evaluation range. That meant the Varrock could approach within 6 feet of the cadet before the safety locks halted forward motion. It did not mean release. It did not mean contact. It did not mean Maven Threx and his little balcony of inherited importance had won. At least, that was what I told myself while my thumb hovered over the command seal a fraction longer than necessary. The arena system chirped for confirmation. Caleb Mercer watched the Varric. The Varric watched Caleb Mercer. Every other creature in the room watched me. I pressed the seal. A low tone rolled through Training Pit 7, and the white circle around Caleb narrowed to a tighter ring. The air shimmered as the field recalibrated. Handler drones shifted outward. The Predator collar flashed amber, then green. A routine adjustment. We had done it hundreds of times. Usually, the Varric responded before the sound faded. It would rise, stretch its plated shoulders, and stalk toward the cadet with the slow confidence of something that knew the universe had placed it near the top of the food chain. Cadets would learn quickly that fear was not theoretical. Their breathing would break first, then their stance, then their pride. This time, the Varric did not rise. It inhaled. That was all. One deep pull of air through a nose wide enough to send a trail across miles of open rock. The sound carried through the arena microphones, rough and wet and huge. Caleb tilted his head slightly, as if listening to an engine turn over in cold weather. The Predator inhaled again. Its pupils narrowed. Its ears twitched backward. The collar remained green, but the biological monitors above my console began to populate with yellow warning marks. Elevated stress response. Cortisol spike. Defensive posture. Not Caleb. The Varric. I stared at the readout hard enough to make my eyes ache. The animal was not reacting to movement. Caleb had made none. It was not reacting to sound. The human had not spoken. It was reacting to scent. The most advanced predator in our academy had taken one breath of an Earthborn cadet and decided the room had become complicated. Behind the glass, Maven forced a laugh. Perhaps it smells lunch, he said. Nobody joined him this time. Caleb slowly turned his head toward the command tower. Commander, he said, still polite, still maddeningly calm. That collar is bothering him. I looked at the animal. The pressure collar sat below the jawline, regulation fitted, not tight enough to restrict breathing, not loose enough to slip. The collar is standard safety equipment, I said. It is agitating him. You are not qualified to assess that. Caleb nodded once, accepting the correction without accepting the truth of it. That irritated me even more. Then he did something no cadet had ever done during a predator evaluation. He lowered himself into a crouch. Slowly, clearly, hands visible, shoulders relaxed. He made himself smaller, not weaker. There is a difference, though I did not understand it then. The Varric's breathing changed again. It leaned forward half an inch. The whole room held still. Caleb looked directly into those black, ancient eyes and spoke softly. Enough that the microphones barely caught it. Hey, big guy. Nobody here needs to prove anything. The words were meaningless. The tone was not. The predator stopped trembling. Not completely. Just enough for every handler in the pit to notice. Just enough for me to feel my certainty crack down the middle. Because the Varric had not obeyed my command. It had responded to his voice. I gave the attack command, and the most obedient predator in the academy looked at me like I had asked it to step off a cliff. The sound of my order rolled through the arena speakers in formal command cadence. Sharp, clean, impossible to misunderstand. Varric, advance. Every handler stiffened. Every cadet leaned forward. The collar lights flashed once as the neural command locks translated my voice into the creature's trained response pattern. For 14 years, that pattern had been reliable enough to build policy around. Order, motion, pressure, evaluation. The Varric knew the sequence better than some first-year cadets knew their own dorm assignments. This time, it did nothing. Not almost nothing. Not delayed obedience. Nothing. Its paws stayed planted on the arena floor. Its head remained low. Its eyes stayed on Caleb Mercer, who was still crouched inside the white ring like the situation had become a conversation instead of a military test. The system waited 2 seconds, then flagged noncompliance in yellow across my console. I felt heat rise beneath my collar plating. Machines can be wrong quietly. Public failure is loud. Maven Threx made a delighted little sound from the observation tier. The sound of a spoiled cadet discovering someone else might be humiliated instead of him. Perhaps the legendary beast needs clearer instruction, he said. I ignored him because I was one breath away from ordering his microphone disabled. Instead, I keyed in a second command. This one reinforced with the Academy's dominance frequency, a subsonic signal used only when a trained predator resisted standard direction. The floor vibrated under my boots. Several cadets winced. Caleb did not. The Varric did. That small reaction hit me harder than any alarm. It flinched away from the command. Frequency, not toward Caleb, away from me. Then it turned its head slightly, just enough to show one dark eye to the command tower. There was no rebellion in that look. No rage. No confusion. It looked tired, cornered, forced to choose between the voice that owned its training and the instinct that had kept its species alive for millions of years. I lowered my voice. Advance. The collar flashed green. The drones adjusted position. The safety field hummed. The Varric took one step. The cadets exhaled as if the universe had corrected itself. Maven smiled wider. Then the Predator stopped 6 feet from Caleb and folded its front legs. The arena went completely quiet. It did not bow like a servant. It did not collapse like a frightened animal. It lowered itself with deliberate care, placing its massive head below Caleb's shoulder height, exposing the thick line of its neck in a gesture every xenobiology student in that room understood. Submission, not defeat. Recognition. Caleb's expression changed for the first time. Not triumph. Not pride. Something gentler, and somehow more terrifying because of it. He looked up at me and said, "Commander, I think he understands the test better than we do." I had no answer ready for that. My console still blinked noncompliance. The Academy protocol still demanded a completed evaluation. The cadets still waited for me to prove I was in control. But the Varric had made its decision, and every creature in Training Pit 7 knew it. The Predator had refused my order, not because it was broken, not because it was weak, and not because the human had threatened it. It refused because whatever it smelled in Caleb Mercer told it one simple truth. Smart animals do not attack hurricanes. The moment the Varric lowered its head, every lesson I had ever taught about dominance began to sound like superstition. We had charts for submission behavior. We had diagrams, scent models, posture indexes, neural response maps, and 6,000 pages of predator handling theory stored in the Academy archives. None of them prepared me for the sight of 8 tons of apex muscle, holding perfectly still while a human cadet reached out one open hand. "Do not touch it," I said. The words came out too fast. Not command fast. Fear fast. Caleb paused with his palm a few inches from the Varric's snout and looked up at me. There was no challenge in his face. That somehow made it worse. "He is asking," Caleb said. Maven Threx laughed again, but it broke halfway through. "Animals do not ask permission from prey." Caleb did not look at him. The Varric did. One slow turn of the head. One dark eye lifting toward the observation tier. Maven stopped smiling. Good. At least someone in that room was still learning. I should have ended the test right there. I should have sealed the pit, dismissed the class, and buried the recording under administrative review until my superiors forgot to ask for it. Instead, I watched Caleb place his hand gently against the Predator's snout. The arena did not explode. The safety drones did not fire warning signals. The collar did not activate. The Varric simply closed its eyes. I heard someone behind me whisper a prayer in a language the translator did not catch. Another cadet made a soft clicking sound of disbelief. The handlers stared at their consoles as if the numbers had personally betrayed them. The biological feed showed the impossible in clean Academy colors. Predator stress decreasing. Heart rate stabilizing. Aggression markers dropping below baseline. The creature we used to teach fear was calming down because the human was touching it. Caleb moved his hand once, slow and careful, along the ridge above the Varric's nose. "You have got old scars under the collar," he said softly. "No wonder you hate commands." That sentence should not have mattered. It was not tactical. It was not scientific. It was not even directed at me. But it cut through the room harder than a formal accusation. For years, we had treated the Varric as an instrument. Valuable, dangerous, maintained, controlled, respected in the way one respects a loaded system. Caleb looked at it and saw a living thing that remembered pain. The Predator leaned forward by half an inch. Not enough to push, just enough to accept the contact. Then, with a sound so low the floor sensors picked it up before our ears did, the Varric gave one slow rumble. The translation software tried to classify it as a threat display, failed, recalculated, and finally displayed 3 uncertain words on my console. Affiliative recognition signal. I stared at those words until they stopped looking real. The Varric was not submitting to Caleb because he had conquered it. It was recognizing him because he had understood it. That was a different kind of power. Quieter. Older. Much harder to defend against. Caleb stood, and the predator rose only after he did, keeping its head lower than his shoulder. A symbolic posture. A choice. A public one. Above the pit, 200 cadets watched their hierarchy rearrange itself without a speech, without a fight, without a single dramatic gesture from the human. Caleb Mercer had not defeated the Academy's apex predator. He had done something far more disturbing. He had made it feel safe. I thought the lesson had ended when the Varric chose to stand beside Caleb Mercer. But pride has a way of walking into closed doors and blaming the door. Maven Threx could not accept what the rest of us had just seen. His entire world had been built on visible strength, public rank, and the comforting belief that every creature knew its proper place. A human cadet from Earth had stepped into our most feared arena, touched the Academy predator with an open hand, and rearranged that belief in under a minute. Maven did not look frightened at first. He looked offended. That was worse. Fear can teach. Offense only argues. This proves nothing, he said, too loudly. His voice carried through the observation microphones, thin and sharp against the heavy silence. The animal malfunctioned. The human interfered with conditioning. The test parameters are invalid. No one answered him. Not his friends. Not the handlers. Not me. We were all watching the Varric, because the creature had shifted its body between Caleb and the observation tier without being told. A small motion. A quiet motion. The kind that means nothing until you realize a predator has chosen where the danger is. Caleb noticed too. His hand lowered from the Varric's snout, and his eyes moved up toward Maven. Do not do anything. Stupid, he said, calmly, almost kindly. Maven's crest flared bright silver. He heard advice as insult, because spoiled cadets often do. Do not lecture me, Earthborn. His hand moved to the student console mounted beside his seat, the one used for simulated tactical voting during class demonstrations. It was not connected to weapons. It was not supposed to affect arena controls. It could, however, request a diagnostic reset if an evaluation was disputed by a senior cadet observer. Another old privilege granted to noble houses that should have been removed decades earlier. I saw the request flash across my command panel. Predator response verification. Manual stimulus pulse. My blood went cold. Maven, step away from that console. He smiled at me, and for the first time all morning, he looked like a child pretending to be an officer. For accurate data, Commander. He confirmed the request before my lockout finished loading. The arena lights flickered from white to amber. A harmless stimulus pulse, according to policy. A sharp sound, a flash, a pressure wave designed to make a predator re-engage with the test. Harmless on paper. Paper had never stood next to a nervous apex animal and a calm human. The pulse fired. The Varric moved before the sound reached the glass. Not toward Caleb. Around him. It placed its huge body fully between the human and the source of the disruption, head low, shoulders wide, every line of it saying no in a language older than translation. Caleb did not flinch. That fact landed on the class harder than the pulse itself. The human did not step behind the predator. He rested one hand lightly against its side, not restraining it, not commanding it, just reminding it that panic was optional. The Varric stilled. The entire arena stilled with it. Maven's face lost its color. His console locked red as Academy security finally cut his access. I opened the speaker channel, but Caleb spoke first, and his voice was quiet enough that everyone leaned in to hear it. You scared him to prove I was dangerous, he said. That was not smart. No threat. No anger. Just a fact. Somehow, that made Maven lower his eyes. The Varric remained in front of Caleb until the amber lights returned to white. Then it looked up at the observation tier, not wild, not confused, but certain. That was when the class understood the test had changed again. The Academy predator was no longer refusing to attack the human. It was protecting him from us. After the security lockout, I ended the evaluation with one spoken command and more humility than I had carried into that arena in 14 years. The official system marked Caleb Mercer as passed. That was absurd. Passed was a small word, a classroom word, a little green stamp for paperwork and graduation files. What happened in Training Pit 7 was not a pass. It was a correction. The barriers rose. The handler drones backed away. The amber warning lights faded into sterile Academy white, and still nobody moved. 200 cadets sat frozen behind reinforced glass, staring at the human as if the shape of him had changed. It had not. Caleb still looked like Caleb. Gray uniform, brown hair, pale skin, calm eyes, no armor, no crest, no visible claim to authority. The only difference was that now every species in the room knew visible strength had been lying to them their entire lives. The Varric stayed at his side until I personally ordered the collar deactivated. Not loosened, not reset, deactivated. A gasp moved through the handler pit, but no one challenged me. Perhaps they heard something in my voice. Perhaps they were finally looking at the creature instead of the protocol. Caleb stepped closer to the Varric and examined the collar seam with a quiet frown. "May I?" he asked. That question was directed at me, but somehow it felt as if he was asking the animal too. I gave permission. He removed the pressure collar with careful hands and set it on the floor like it was something that had already caused enough trouble for one day. The Varric inhaled once, deep and free, then touched its forehead lightly against Caleb's shoulder. It was not dramatic. It was not cute. It was not a trick. It was simply trust, and trust from a creature built to survive everything was worth more than obedience. Maven Threx was escorted from the observation tier without ceremony. No chains. No shouting. Just 2 academy officers standing beside him until his pride understood the assignment. He kept his eyes down as he passed the glass. Caleb did not watch him go. That bothered Maven more than punishment ever could. The human had already moved on. Later, when the class recording reached the senior council, they asked me whether Caleb had used hidden pheromones, unauthorized training signals, or some unknown Earth technique to influence the predator. I told them the truth, though it made the room very uncomfortable. He had used patience. He had used attention. He had used the terrifying human habit of seeing a frightened thing and stepping toward it without needing to own it. Then I pulled up the Earth archive I should have studied before the test. Humans lived beside wolves until wolves became partners. They rode animals 10 times their strength across open land. They guided birds, worked with dogs, swam near creatures large enough to overturn boats, and built homes in places where the weather itself had moods. Earth was not just a death world because it tried to destroy them. Earth was a death world because it taught them the difference between danger and enemy. That was the lesson we missed. That was why the Varric understood Caleb before I did. Predators know posture. They know scent. They know the weight of a creature that has nothing to prove. My final report was only 6 sentences long. I deleted the algorithmic assessment. I deleted low priority. I deleted physically limited. In its place, I wrote the only conclusion that fit the evidence. Cadet Caleb Mercer did not survive the Varric evaluation. The Varric survived contact with Cadet Caleb Mercer by choosing restraint. Recommend immediate revision of all Earthborn threat models. Recommend suspension of predator-based testing for human cadets. Recommend all instructors remember that humans do not need claws to be recognized by things that have them. The Academy wanted to measure the human. Instead, our apex predator measured us, found us arrogant, and quietly stood on his side.